Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Shauna Harrison.
And I'm Dan Pugh. Every Wednesday, we take an idiom or other turn of phrase and try to tell the story from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. Recently, I've been fascinated with some newer idioms, and I've really enjoyed seeing how these phrases got their start in an era where so much of the information surrounding the phrase is already readily available. One of the phrases I came across is hijack the thread, which in internet parlance means taking over the comments section of one post to talk about something off topic. And I thought, well, this sounds like another phrase I've heard, lost the thread. So this week, I want to see when we started using the phrase lost the thread, and if it has any ties to hijack the thread, or if maybe hijack the thread is tied to it. So Shauna, when do you think we started using the phrase lost the thread?
So I really wish that I had some wicked sewing knowledge or something so that I could wow you with my history of, I don't know, weaving or something. Because I feel like that
weavers.
Yes, that it might be beneficial. But I'm going to go with 1600s maybe. But I don't know.
Okay.
Let's see.
Let's start us off. Lost the thread means to cease to follow the sense of what is being said. And that's what lose the thread or lost the thread means.
Right.
And that's according to the Oxford English Dictionary. So to start with, the key here is the word thread. And according to the Oxford English Dictionary, thread itself has meant a fine cord comprised of the fibers or filaments of something since the 700s CE. But another definition of thread used by the Oxford English Dictionary is that which connects the successive points in anything, especially a narrative or train of thought. Also, the sequence of events or ideas continuing through the whole course of anything. So we've seen thread used that way since at least the 1600s, which is what you said.
Bam! That's awesome. I'm excited about that right there.
Well, a couple of examples of thread being used in this figurative way are in James Howell's instructions for foreign travel, but they spell foreign really weird here.
Foreign?
No, it is foreign travel, but it's spelled Forrein.
That's really interesting.
Yes, it is.
I love how the words, the spelling of words has changed over time because some of them it's really fast, really cool.
I can barely spell words correctly now, and I always got low marks in that in school. So
right,
it's probably students probably don't like that at all.
Yeah, I can imagine. I just think it's cool because some of the vowels had completely different sound, profiles than they do now.
Yes, very true. And there's a lot of fun etymology podcasts that cover that. Ours is not one of them. So James Howell, in Instructions of Foreign Travel, if one reads skippingly and by snatches and not take the thread of the story along, it must needs puzzle and distract the memory.
Dude, that could be said. Let's bring that back. I like his whole phrase.
I don't know that I want to bring any of it back because it sounds vaguely dirty, but it's not.
That's awesome. That's perfect. Come on.
All right. So another example is in 1687 in John Dryden's The Hind and the Panther. The matron then resumed the thread of her discourse again. So we saw two examples here of the figurative use of thread. And that figurative use actually manifests itself into two idioms. We're going to talk about one of them today. So to pick up the thread, which also at some point is take up the thread, but that means to continue with or after an interruption or a separation. And
Gotcha.
Then sometimes to resume an interrupted friendship. So to pick up the threads in this case would be to restart something after an interruption using that figurative of thread.
That's really cool too, and it makes me think about knitting or whatever. Because if you lose a stitch, it's real bad, and then you have to find it again and pick it back up from there. So that's kind of what popped into my head.
I'm going to take your word for that because that is not a thing that I know how to do.
Well, I don't knit either, but my sister does. She's really, really good with it. And anyway, but she's talked about it before, and it sounds like it's awful.
Well, the other idiom that comes out of this is to lose the thread, which we mentioned already, is not following the sense of what has been said. Here, we don't know when lost the thread started. I spent a couple of days looking for early attestations, and the earliest I could find was in March 19th, 1750. And we know the direct date because it was a letter written by the late Right Honorable Philip Dormer Stanhope, Earl of Chesterfield, to his son, Philip Stanhope, Esquire.
Ah, very important people there, or at least sounding like they're important.
Well, they definitely sounded like they're important, but the late Right Honorable has very specific meanings in England. I don't know what those meanings are. I remember watching a YouTube video on it and then remembering that that's not my form of government, so I don't care.
Oh,
I can barely keep track of the form of government in America.
Yeah, me too. But I do like this concept. So it's like late and right and honorable, like each have significance.
Yes, they all have their, yes. Well,
Gotcha.
late, I'm pretty sure, is dead.
Well,
but...
yeah. But like then the right is like to the right or left of the crown or something. I have no idea, but I'm making guesses, assumptions there. Wide assumptions.
This particular letter was published in volume 2 of these works, and the works were published in 1765, but this letter was written in 1750. And he says, "The succession to the kingdoms of Naples and Sicily, being a point which, upon the death of the present King of Spain, is likely to occasion some disputes, do not lose the thread of these matters, which is carried on with great ease, but, if once broken, is resumed with difficulty." And those are just some wise words.
Yeah, man.
There are so many things in life that once, if it just keeps going on, it's fine. But if it stops, you're going to have a really hard time restarting it.
Yeah, man, he's laying down some wisdom, dope wisdom to his, what is that, son? Yeah,
yes,
his son.
To
Okay.
his son. Yeah, so that was the first time I saw it. And he just says, do not lose the thread of these matters. So he doesn't define it anywhere, which means it's most likely in the common language at this point in time. We see another example of this in the ready for this title. This is our first amazingly long title for 2020 here in season 3. The Complete Dictionary of Arts and Sciences, in which the whole circle of human learning is explained, and the difficulties attending the acquisition of every art, whether liberal or mechanical, are removed in the most easy and familiar manner.
I mean, okay, listen, I feel like if that's really what this book encompasses, then the title has to be long because the book would be enormous.
Yeah, I don't think they really cover everything that we've ever learned, but nonetheless, this was written by several men. I'm just going to say Henry Crocker and et al., and that'll just have to cover it.
Fair enough.
So in this book, and I don't quite understand the concepts because they're talking about Arabians, meaning the Arab person, and they defined it as such, like specifically defined what they meant by Arabians, and then used Arab in there, so anyone of the Arab places. But I still don't know what that's supposed to mean in 1765.
Gotcha.
This was published, I should say it was published in 1766, but it was written in 1765, and they were very clear to say that they had written it and it didn't get published until later. I don't know why that mattered.
That's really
nonetheless.
That's funny. Maybe somebody else came up with they released the more complete,
Who knows? Well, and they also were talking here in this quote about a religion, but I'm not sure which one they're talking about there. It does reference the Abrahamic traditions, so it could be several. It could be Judaism, it could be Christianity, Protestant, or Catholicism. It could be Islam. So there's a whole lot of things that this could be. I don't know which one they're talking about, and frankly, I don't care. So here's the quote.
Fair enough.
The philosophy of Abraham, from whom they boast their descent, by no means proves their having cultivated this science. Abraham might have been their primogenitor and a great philosopher, but their philosophy is no necessary consequence of this. If they had lost the thread of those most valuable truths they had learned from Abraham, if their religion degenerated into gross idolatry, why might not their philosophy, admitting Abraham to have taught it to them, has been lost also in the course of time?
Wow. That was an interesting bit of logic there.
Right. I mean, it seems logical when you first read it, and then you think about it and go, well, now hang on a second.
Whoa. What?
So both of those examples were in books that I found. I also looked through the Chronicle of America's library, and the first time I saw it in print in a newspaper was actually in the Cherokee Phoenix. And this was July 2nd, 1828. But I want to give a bonus thing about this because we oftentimes do not talk enough about indigenous peoples' successes, especially in the face of incredibly overwhelming odds like Manifest Destiny and such. So,
right.
this publication, the first issue of this publication earlier in 1828 of the Cherokee Phoenix, and that was February 21st, at New Echota, Georgia, the Cherokee Nation became the first Native American tribe with a newspaper.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool. And my great-grandmother, who lived on the Cherokee reservation, was very, very proud of that heritage. And so I'm sorry that I can't pronounce New Echota appropriately. I hope I did, but nonetheless. This the newspaper also has a Cherokee name, but that I also can't say that. So, but it does say in English Cherokee Phoenix, so I'm going to stick with that. The disadvantages of a long sermon. A preacher had divided his sermon into 32 sections. One of his auditory arose immediately, who, being asked whither he was going, and said, "To fetch my nightcap, I foresee we shall pass the night here." In effect, the preacher, having lost the thread of his subdivisions, could never reach the end of his sermon. It goes on to say that one by one, everybody left, and then I will pick back up here. When a little singing boy who remained alone cried to him, "Sir, here are the keys of the church. When you have done, be so good as to lock the gate."
That's fantastic. Oh my goodness.
Man, that dude. And like, you can imagine that one little choir boy. And I mean, he's just like, he's doing his best. But at some point, he's like, I gotta go home. Never mind.
Yeah, like he's probably falling asleep and stuff, you know? He's trying real hard.
Here's another example from Dodge City, Kansas. This is out of the Dodge City Times, September 25th, 1880. And this is basically talking about a gathering. And this was, I'll just set a quick stage. This is what they say the Democratic powwow in Kelly's Hall last night was fairly attended, but lacking in enthusiasm. And this was between two different parties, because at that time we had a Northern Democrat and a Southern Democrat party. And so this was between the Northern and the Southern Democrats. The stage was beautifully decorated with the national emblems and finely ornamented with two local Democratic luminaries, Count von Gryden and Duke de Petillon. They were the attractive features of this evening, and the audience no doubt lost the thread of the speeches in the profound admiration of the stage ornaments and decoration.
That's like fantastic. Okay, so I mean, okay, your two people that are representatives are so boring, or you've got some really fantastic decorations. Like this one of the two, right?
I think it was a little bit of both is what the guy was getting at. In
That's
fact,
awesome.
he did accuse, because one of these guys, I think it was the Count von Gryden, I think his brother-in-law owned the location, Kelly's Hall, which is actually a tavern. And so later in the newspaper, they comment on him leaving the stage while the other guy was going on some sort of a long diatribe and sneaking backstage to get alcohol. And then coming back on stage unnoticed by the other orator.
That's awesome. Like, I mean, like, okay, sometimes you need a little break, you know? It's like, this is going to go on a while.
Right. I also saw one in 1892. This is from the United States Congress. And this was from a thing that they published, the Select Committee to Investigate Representative Thomas Watson's charges of drunkenness on the floor of the House. This is by the U.S. Government Printing Press. U.S. Government Printing Office. The question was posed, how many minutes do these interruptions usually continue? The answer, sometimes for 10 minutes. If the interruptions had been confined to one point, I do not think he would have lost the thread of his argument. But the interruptions came in almost every phase.
You know, okay, that's a good point. Like, you know, you're trying to explain a thing and people keep interrupting. I'm just saying, that's hard. Like, you're trying to tell a story, because I'm one of those people, I never get to finish a story because people keep asking random questions, and then I forget what I was even saying.
Well, your home life involves a lot of loud people who like to talk, and your growing up life, if I remember, hearing you talk about it, also involved a lot of loud people who like to talk.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I like to talk too. I'm just not as loud as all the other people. So a lot of times I just not, because it was easier.
Out. You're also a middle kid, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm the middleist. No, I'm the young middleist.
Young middleist. That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right, another example. Let's move into the 1900s here. And this is out of the New York Tribune, out of New York, obviously. August 13th, 1905. This is from a piece called Reed's Rules at Town Meetings by Holman Day. The interruption had been too much for the foreman's strained composure. Neither his cows, nor his horse, nor his cat had ever broken into mar the mellifluous and continuous flow of his oratory. Once started, he needed to keep going. Any tyro who has stood before an audience and has lost the thread of his discourse understands how utterly blank the mind becomes.
That is true. If you've ever sang also and you forgot a lyric and then you don't remember anything that's ever been in your brain ever.
The worst.
Yep. The whole thing, it's gone.
Yep. I have no idea. Oh, no, if I even stop and think about the Star Spangled Banner and the words to that while I'm singing it, I'm done. I have no idea what's going on.
You just can't. Done. There's no more singing this song. It's over. That's the end.
I did want to point out that I thought a lot about Mulan and the dragon, the little dragon voiced by Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
Right,
I love
where
that guy.
It goes, neither his cows, nor his own horse, nor his cat.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. When he's like,
a curse on you, and a curse on your cow.
Dishonor. That's what it is.
Yes.
Dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow.
Right. That's exactly
God,
what I
I
thought.
love that. That's fantastic. That's one of my favorite movies.
Really?
Well, I was a
good for you.
teenager when it came out, and it had great music, and
Yeah. No, I was not a teenager when it came out, and so I don't think I really paid much attention to it. I've seen it because I have kids, but
it was kind of that time frame was sort of the start of the sort of girl power, but in a positive way.
Oh, yeah, sure.
If that makes sense. And yeah, Christina Aguilera was singing it, and it was,
no, I get that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm a guy, so I don't always think about things from that perspective.
Yeah, it was different. There weren't a lot of female role models that also seemed that were chill and cool and powerful.
Princess Jasmine seemed pretty.
No, she's
cool.
pretty awesome. Yeah.
I was gonna say BA, but
I almost said that too.
All right, let's move on. So one of the maybe more head-scratching uses I saw was in a technical manual by the U.S. War Department. This was in 1945. This was in the Dictionary of Spoken Russian, and from what I can tell by reading it, it appears to take English words, like lose, for example, and then give English phrases and their Russian equivalents following the word. So under lose, one of the phrases is, I lost the thread, which is a phrase that seems literally to a non-native speaker like, I can't find the sewing stuff. But I don't read or speak Russian, so I don't know how they translated that. But I do know that the word they use for lose is the same word in the phrase after lost the thread. So I'm just not sure if, I don't know. I like seeing how they translate idioms, how anybody translates idioms between languages, because in general it doesn't work well. But I'm just not entirely sure if the U.S. War Department knew something super awesome here or was just really, really bad.
Yeah, I don't know. Part of me thinks that you just shouldn't use idioms in any kind of technical manual, or
right?
especially if it pertains to war.
Completely valid point. Although we do get so many of our idioms from war.
That's true. I will say though, on the language translation piece, that I have some friends who speak Spanish, and I can understand for the most part, and then, I speak English, and so they can understand most of our conversations. And so, though, sometimes when we send each other messages online, then, it's trying to use that translation piece, if I'm not sure what it is, especially if it has an idiom in it. And then it might say something like misplaced the yarn. And I'm going, I'm sure that means something. And you got to kind of, figure out what it is. And yeah, it's fun.
That's why you use an interpreter and not a translator.
Absolutely. Or you just ask your friend back and forth in two different languages until you both figure it out.
Yeah, that seems fair. Well, in any case, this phrase has been around since the 1700s as lose the thread, lost the thread, and losing the thread. And it hasn't changed much in its meaning or usage, which is pretty amazing for a phrase that's over 300 years old.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive to keep the same word, the same text. Yeah, that's cool. Bunny Trails is and will always be free, but we are only able to make this content because of the awesome support of our patrons, including Pat Rowe and Mary Lopez. Because of Pat, Mary, and many others, you don't have to pay a dime to enjoy Bunny Trails week after week. But even though Dan and I volunteer our time, there are still costs to making the show, including hosting fees, transcription costs, equipment maintenance, domain fees, and more. So, if you are in a financially stable place and would like to support this educational art form, we encourage you to check out the options at patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or you can link to it from our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
So let's move into today and how it's used now. We find a 2002 TV documentary called Losing the Thread. And this is the synopsis I found on IMDb about this documentary. This is a portrait of Lorenzo, a Florentine artist who has been repeating the creation of the same work of art for more than 20 years. A pliant and pointed blue, yellow, red acrylic thread. And thread is in quotations.
Oh.
So I had to go to the artist's website to really catch a grasp of what they were talking about here, which basically is his website is a portmanteau of the object of his work and his name. So it's philorenzo.com.
Ah, very clever.
So in 1977, he created the philo, an object in the form of a filament or strand made of blue, yellow, and red acrylic paint, punctuated by small vertical outgrowths in the same alternating primary colors. It looks like thread. Since its creation, the philo has remained the generative cell, central medium, and symbol of Pezzettini's artwork. The artist's dedication to the manual execution of the philo, his attention to the process, and his interaction with the public constitute the foundation of his artistic research. So the documentary is called Losing the Thread, and this was basically the whole documentary was about trying to find the reason for this, which the filmmaker kind of laments both at the very beginning of the documentary and at the end of it again, that he never really found out why. But it seems like the process of telling that story is as much a why as trying to understand the actual reasons that this artist used these particular this particular style for 20 plus years now. So once again, the artist's website is philorenzo.com. philorenzo.com. There's a song by Woodpecker Street. This is called Lose the Thread, and it's off the 2006 album Bold New City. I could only find this on Spotify, and I could not find the lyrics, but I listened to the song, and so I did pull out these lyrics. Don't go with him and lose the thread. You could be kidnapped and left for dead.
That's a little intense.
It is a little intense, and the song is kind of like, I don't know, a disjointed, upbeat type song. So kind of techno-ish, but yeah, it was very interesting. They're on Spotify, so go check them out. The Woodpecker Street. There's also a 2018 piece of art. This is by Kate Fitzpatrick. She's an artist who does a variety of forms. She has a multimedia piece called Losing the Thread, which uses paper with red glyphs on it, and it has multiple threads coming out of it. So I went to the website, and the artist's general statement about her work covers this part, and I think it covers this bit a little bit well, too. She says, sign systems play a crucial part in the social construction of our reality, and we often cannot separate these systems from our own experiences. We take understanding these signs for granted and don't often think about how we came to understand these signs or if others can understand the way we use them. However, sign systems can take a form of words, images, sounds, body gestures, and objects. All signs communicate something that we may or may not understand based on our own culture and experiences in the world at large. My work exists in the gap between image and text. The creation of my own glyphs and script transfer the delay of meaning and interpretation to provide a container for schema. You can see her work at katesfitzart.com. That's KATESFITZART.com.
This is a neat concept that she uses here about the signs. I observed but didn't participate in a conversation on social media. It was a pleasant one, though, where they were all discussing the emoji that has the one tear that kind of, you can't tell if it's laughing, sort of laughing. And it was interesting the different ways in which people from similar backgrounds, the same area of our country even, had different interpretations for what that one emoji meant.
It's like the Mona Lisa of emojis.
Yeah.
Is she smiling? Is she not? Where are her eyebrows?
Is it funny? Embarrassing? You laughed till you peed? I don't know.
Oh, man. I can't think of a time that I laughed until I peed. That sounds awful.
I mean, listen, sometimes you just can't stop laughing and then stuff happens. I don't know.
I normally laugh until I have a coughing fit. That's where mine inevitably lead to if I laugh and laugh and laugh.
Fair enough. I don't think I've ever peed, but definitely had to like laugh until I can't breathe because, like it's just all collapsing or something.
Well, now that we've had a conversation about pee laughing, I'll close out with a couple of usages recently, like within the last couple of days on social media. At DC Peterson on Twitter wrote, "I've always thought the worst possible thing is to die unexpectedly, to not know it's coming, to not know what comes after, to lose the thread of all the things you cared about. When I die, please, someone tell me about it. Will someone promise me that? I need it."
That's a really cool and it reminds me of this quote by Marcus Aurelius where he talks about essentially that it doesn't matter how old or young you are, that you exist in the present and you can't lose something you don't have. So you don't lose the past or the future. You lose your present wherever that is. And so, I don't know, it's kind of deep thoughts here.
Yeah. Well, this was an unusually deep thought from Twitter.
Definitely.
I also saw this one a little more upbeat. This is from Tom the Fanboy. And this was on a conversation thread about those who have trouble regarding attention spans and then listening to audiobooks. He says, "Oh, I rewind stuff a lot. I lose the thread sometimes, but it's super easy to rewind and replay, especially when they chop the book up into multiple files. If you hate being read to, though, that's a deal breaker."
So true. And I love all the things about that. That's exactly right. I love my backup 10-second button. I use it all the time.
I have found that when I'm listening to audiobooks, I rarely have that issue. Although occasionally when I'm listening to a freeform podcast, kind of something that's slightly improv like ours or something that's heavily improv like My Brother and Me.
Right.
Like that. So if I'm listening to something that's really well scripted, like the Anthropocene Reviewed, I don't have that problem. I'm able to follow it just fine. Or books, I don't have any problem with that.
Right.
But when it gets a little conversational, then I'll feel like, wait, what? I just missed something and I have to back it up.
Yeah, and then I kind of think in that regard, it probably has something to do with being able to drop and pick up that piece of it without losing too much, but then your brain kind of has to do a double take.
Yeah, and if I have to ask my brain to get involved, it's going to go downhill from there.
I need only my subconscious to do the thinking.
That's right. Yeah, my subconscious is fine. If my active conscious has to get involved, I'm hosed. All right, so last one for today by user at Dea_Pope. "Some days it's easy to lose the thread that we are making progress, healing, discovering what we authentically want and need to feel fulfilled. But some days you remember again that this is all really taking you to better days, and that's beautiful." So this message reminds me that we do often lose the thread of ourselves, especially on social media. I love connecting with people from across the world, but it is difficult to compare my life to everyone else's highlight reels. But I'm sure that I'm not the only one who feels that way. I'm sure that that's
absolutely
a common thread. So we don't want to lose the thread that you are important and you matter. And we are thankful that you have chosen to spend the last 30 minutes with us. And we hope it brightens your day at least a little bit.
Aww.
But don't get sappy now. We do have a favor to ask of you. So if you're going to be on social media anyway, help us spread the word about the show. Make a post about what you like about bunny trails and tag it with bunny trails as a hashtag or whatever tag that you use so that more people can find it.
We're so excited to be back for a third season, and it is all thanks to you. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. And until then, remember, words belong to their users.